The Presidency yesterday formally reacted to last week's report by London-based The Economist's magazine. In its publication, the magazine said that President Muhammadu Buhari-led administration wasn't doing enough to address several challenges confronting the country, especially the rising state of insecurity. The Senior Special Assistant to the President on Media and Publicity, Garba Shehu, in a statement stressed that the present administration, since it came into power in May 2015, had remained resolute and will do everything possible to ensure that the identified threats to the nation's stability, including terrorist attacks, kidnapping, herder farmers clashes, and activities of the proscribed indigenous people of Biafra, IPOB, in the Southeast Zone will become history by the time President Buhari finishes his tenure in May 2023. I'll come to you, Dr. Abati, while I catch my breath, and then I'll have my turn when you're done. So what are your thoughts?
Well, the October 23 edition of The Economist, which is titled Nigeria, the crime scene at the heart of Africa, wrote this report in which the Nigerian army was accused of not doing enough. The Nigerian army was more or less dismissed as incompetent. The Nigerian army was described as a mighty, well, I don't want to keep repeating these phrases, but that many of the persons, what you see is a payroll, and at the end of the day, most of the people are ghosts. In other words, the publication, otherwise highly respected, believes that the Nigerian government is not doing enough to secure lives and property. Apart from the Nigerian army, the Economist's report also, attacked the Nigerian police. Says that the Nigerian police is busy extorting money from the same people that they're supposed to protect. In other words, an incompetent police force, and that all of this, will seem to have implications for the security of lives and property, the development of Nigeria, and the war against terror. However, the report ended with a recommendation about how the Nigerian government needs to do a lot more. Well, understandably, that kind of, wholesale dismissal of the police has been understaffed, underperforming, corrupt, and also of the Nigerian army as, a collection of ghosts who are not making any difference with regard to the situation in the country, the security challenges, will attract reactions. And the Nigerian army was the first to fire the salvo. The spokesperson of the Nigerian army dismissed the report by the Economist as vexatious, as fake news, as misleading, as the handiwork of persons, who do not appreciate the work of the administration in Nigeria. And the spokesperson urged people to disregard that report, while stating the efforts that have been made by the Nigerian military to secure lives and property and fight banditry, kidnapping, terrorism in Nigeria. Now, yesterday, Garba Shehu, spokesperson for the president, issued his own release, echoing more or less the same statements. But in his own case, he pointed out that, look, contrary to what the report in The Economist was pointing out, that indeed the Buhari administration has done a lot more than any other administration before now to fight all the basic crises, banditry, kidnapping, cattle herders and farmers conflict, and that indeed if there was any problem, it was that this administration inherited a lot. And he went on in that statement to cite instances of how the Buhari administration, in his reckoning, has been able to decimate the ranks of terrorists, and how, it has equipped the security agencies, and how, what has been done amounts to a mischaracterization. In fact, the military used the word hatchet job. Okay, so this is the second time within a short while that the Nigerian government would have issues with foreign publications. Before this particular one, it was a report in the Wall Street Journal about how, even the military now pays bandits and terrorists to be able to get, their equipment back. And in fact, in the Economist's report, it was even suggested that it's even the military officers themselves who sell, state facilities for prosecuting the war against terror to bandits and terrorists. So this was a damning report coming from the Economists. And I think it was important that the Nigerian government, the army, the presidency spoke up, because they are also entitled to the right of reply. And I hope that the Economists will respect that right of reply. The only group that has not spoken up, that was mentioned in the Economist's report, is the Nigerian police. So I hope that the Nigerian police will also read that report and put up some kind of defense. But we know, of course, that the Nigerian police in Nigeria, yes, they are understaffed. On that one, I agree with the Economists. Yes, the Nigerian police is underperforming. That I agree with the Economists. 3, to say that the Nigerian police is an extortionist unit. Many Nigerians will agree. So, but I think what is more important is that the Nigerian government still needs to do a lot more. In terms of the details, I find the response of the Nigerian army quite robust, and I find the response from the presidency also very useful. Now, what the army didn't add is that the army has a nominal role, a proper role of persons serving within the Nigerian military, from number 1 to number whatever. Well, maybe sometimes they need to make these things public so that nobody will jump to the conclusion that a strategic institution like the Nigerian military that has seen action in many places, locally and internationally, will be peopled by ghosts.
Well, I tend to take Western media portrayals of Africa with a bucket load of salt, frankly, because I find them lacking in nuance. I find them racist, patronizing. I read this really great satirical essay by a Kenyan writer called Wainaina, How to Write About Africa. And he was saying you have to include pictures of AK-47 and, malnourished children and naked breasts and what have you. You have to talk about tribal and all of this. This is what we see here. I tend to take it not as gospel. I'm trying to be polite here to the Economist with its reputation. However, like you observed, there's some facts that cannot be disputed. You've mentioned all of them. It also talks about demotivation in the ranks. Can we not see that? Also talks about the complacency of the political class. Can we not see, can we not experience, can we not observe all of that? And, but it's been reported today, hasn't it? Today is this day, that the Nigerian Air Force has killed 60 terrorists using helicopters and alpha jets and what have you. And in that article, it said that essentially Nigerian military is like wasting their time using the wrong priorities, investing in this machinery. But we have seen that it actually does have its gains. So like I said, the Western media, for me, I don't take them as gospel. Frankly, they don't always know what they're talking about. And on the issue of selling arms, you'll recall recently, was last month, a Commodore gave evidence to the House of Reps saying that Chadian soldiers are the ones who sell their guns for $20 or $30, not Nigerian soldiers. I must say that the Nigerian Navy denied that, but that lady specifically said Chadian. And we read in this report that it's Nigeria. So this is why I tend to doubt. But I noticed that Garba Shehu agreed with that report on the delusional nature of IPOP. He liked that part, but didn't really like the rest.
I agree with you that there's this stereotyping about the African continent.
Of course.
And there are stock phrases that they use. But the challenge in that, in terms of the imbalance in the global information order, is that we have to tell our own stories more.
We do.
I think that should be the big indication for the affected institutions. When we tell our own stories and we dominate the narrative, it will be very difficult for any Western publication to impose prejudice, bias, and stereotype, or some kind of jaundice profiling on us.
Absolutely. Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. And now for a global business update, Michael Wilson joins us from London. Good morning, Mr. Wilson.
Good morning both. Asia Pacific stocks a bit mixed this morning. HSBC good though, and oil prices rise. Shares in Asia Pacific therefore fairly mixed this morning. Hong Kong's Hang Seng rose a bit. HSBC adding to that success really today. HSBC up 0.5%. Pre-tax profit third quarter that was way over expectations and so on. The shares in the embattled Chinese developer Evergrande jumped around 4% yesterday. The the group announced that it was actually starting work again on some kind of properties. Now, the interesting thing about this is that the pictures went on a social media site, and they were actually date stamped, as if the authorities there were trying to say this is actually happening right now. This is in southern China, around about the Pearl River Delta, and they've started work on more than 10 projects. So whatever's going on there, I know they did repay about $83 million worth of interest payment on Friday/Saturday. So mainland stocks, China stocks, slightly higher. Again, the authorities, we're not quite sure what the intervention there is, but I'm just telling you that as a following bit of information on Evergrande, because we have been following that story very closely. China is also pushing to develop its own chips, and according to a report out today, it can't do a great deal, even though it's wanting to do it without foreign technology. It's still a long way off, according to many experts, self-sufficient technological sufficiency, and it's very heavily dependent on foreign technology. Baidu launched one in August. Alibaba, telling you about that one, it released an AI chip and cloud computing chip last week. Semiconductors obviously key for everything, and as you know, they've also become a key component in the trade war between the US and China, or at least the battle. It may not be a war as we speak, but there's certainly a lot of noise coming almost on a weekly basis between the United States and China. Hong Kong has a zero COVID policy, and according to some people actually who are businesses within the region, it's forcing businesses out. It's some of the most stringent travel restrictions in the world. It's virtually COVID-19 free, unlike its regional rival Singapore, again more or less COVID free, but also opening its borders, or at least reopening its borders. Let me take you to the United States and a recap there. On Friday, records again. Dow futures fell very, very slightly over the weekend, and in overnight trade in Asia. It's really coming off a winning streak of earnings. Blue chip gained about 1% last week and closed Friday at a record S&P 1.7. I'll go into what's going to happen this week right at the end of my report, but suffice it to say, of the 117 companies in the S&P 500 that are reported earnings today, 84% posted numbers that beat expectations, and S&P companies are expected to grow profits by about 35% in the third quarter. Now, here's one from Poland. Forgive me if I don't get the pronunciation right, but the Prime Minister there, Mateusz Morawiecki, warns of a third world war. The European Court of Justice says parts of Poland's legal system are not what it would call legal, in other words, illegal. Poland's threatening to leave the EU, a big battle there. It's quite important because Poland, amidst all those sort of relatively late joiners to the EU, has got a good growth actually coming out of the pandemic, 3.3% in 2021. That's what it's expected to do, and a rebound in private consumption and also investment activity. Okay, UK budget. That's the big date for the UK this week. And the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak's being asked by business, don't hit us again, say businesses. This week's will be a budget, after all these fractious years of the pandemic, to see whether any stability can be actually brought. We know that big spending is on the way, already a rise in corporation tax, and also a rise in national insurance and so on. So the Chancellor, under close examination, will he be promoting growth and a skills programme investment in the budget? That's what we're hoping for. What he's promising is, as they always do, of course, these politicians, tax cuts before the next election in 3 years' time, but really some pain coming up this week, I'm guessing. UK first gigafactory, Chinese owner Envision, they are boosting things massively as far as production's concerned there, from 17 to 38 gigawatts per hour. It prepares the site for hundreds of thousands of electric cars being built there, and it's doing this in partnership with Nissan. So as promised then, the week ahead, first of all, the UK budget, got all that. Rate meetings from the European Central Bank and also the Bank of Japan. Investors will be hoping that positive earnings will continue. We're going to hear from Facebook. We're going to hear from Alphabet. We're going to be listening to and privacy changes, maybe more privacy changes news from Apple as well, which Snap was complaining about later in the week. But basically, it's all about supply chain issues and semiconductor issues, again, which we've covered many times on the program. That is your Monday Global View. Good morning.
Okay, let's start with Evergrande. In Hong Kong, Evergrande unit shares went up about 6%. But there is, and then the energy group, which is the electric vehicles arm of Evergrande, also went up by about 17%. And we're told that this looks like recovery for Evergrande because of this shift to electric vehicles. But you recall that electric vehicles arm was established only in 2019. There's no production model on the table, and they're even still looking for new investors as recently as last month. So how important is this as a problem being solved, considering the fact that this week Evergrande will still have to look for about $43.5 million to pay offshore, bond investors, and in November there will still be more coupon payments. So, do we think that Evergrande is out of the woods after surviving the default last week as at Friday? That's one. Rishi Sunak. Well, is this a tricky budget, heavily tricky budget, considering what has been said by the new Bank of England chief economist, who says that by the end of the year or early next year, interest rate may go up to 5% or even higher. And of course, the Bank of England governor had said only recently that they would do something about inflation. But whatever they will do about inflation, it looks like the challenge ahead is a very serious one. And then there is a concern of the businesses that you mentioned. The government in the UK wants businesses to drive innovation and investment. But at the same time, there is that contradiction in terms of, what will be on the table by Wednesday, either in terms of, taxes, particularly capital gains tax, and the interest of the business community. And then, of course, Labour has been protesting that about 20%, as disclosed by Rishi Sunak himself, the Chancellor, will be funded by new money, whatever that means. Where is that new money going to come from? So what should we expect, and what are your fears about the quality of the budget we'll have on Wednesday, even with Rishi Sunak saying that it's a fiscal touch-right?
I'll be looking at it very closely for all the things that you've mentioned, but I think mainly what we need is growth. We've had the firefighting. We know all about that. Every government has had, every central bank's had to do that. Every government's had to do the firefighting. Now, where do we go from here? Where is the growth going to come from? Is it going from innovation? Not with higher taxes, it won't. People will move off because Labour is very, very mobile, as are large companies and so on. So I think what the Chancellor has to do is offer some kind of hope. What he's saying this morning is that there will be tax cuts before the next election. That's in 3 years' time, because at the moment we're in this 5-year fixed term thing about elections. So I'll be looking at growth. I'll be looking at, because from growth comes confidence. We have the entrepreneurs, just like you have the entrepreneurs. What you have to do is you can't force them to do anything. You've got to give them the territory that they can inhabit comfortably, and then think, I've got confidence in this, I'm going to grow my business. That's a universal truth. As far as Evergrande's concerned, I have no idea. I mean, I told you that what we saw on social media, date-stamped projects being filmed and being shown on social media, saying we are getting these 10 projects underway again. Are they? I have no idea, and we don't know. We think that what's been paid back is $83 million worth of debt interest. Maybe Evergrande is pulling its way through. I don't know from where, because as we've often said on this program, they're still a very large real estate company with lots of empty properties. How does that work? I really don't know. And thirdly, you were asking about what was your third thing? I've done the budget, done Evergrande, and there was another one that you were asking about. What was your first one?
No, I was talking about Labour, saying that this is a smoke and mirrors budget proposal. And that 20% of significant spending will come from new money. And what is new money in this regard?
Okay, the worst job in the world, I think, is to be the opposition leader having to get up immediately the budget speech is finished and then say, I don't like it because of X, Y, and Z. And I think you'll be hearing a lot of these kind of smoke and mirror arguments. I've done 40 or 50 of these budgets over the years, and I can tell you every opposition leader, every opposition party talks about smoke and mirrors and what's he going to pull out of the hat and where's the money going to come from. There's nothing new there. Of course, it's really, really tricky this time around. What he has to do, as I said, is instill confidence, and from indications of growth and where that's going to come from comes confidence for consumers, which we know are not spending, and also for businesses as well. It's as simple as that. I know what your first point was. It was about electric cars. Yes, there's a universal truth about this. Nothing to do with electric cars. It's about adoption of new things. If they become cheap, then people will buy them. If they don't become cheap, then people who can afford them will have them at the expense of people who can't afford them. That's the way that history has been ever since history was invented. And so as soon as electric cars come down in price, and also we are convinced as an infrastructure to support them, and we're also convinced about the change from fossil fuels to electricity, which we still do not know the cost of. How can I stress that enough? Then there will be no progress. There'll be progress as soon as everything becomes affordable.
Well, I'm told we've run out of time, so I guess I'll leave the conversation about Frances Haugen, the data scientist / Facebook whistleblower / bane of Mark Zuckerberg's existence, and her meeting with the MPs today on the online safety bill. We'll talk about that tomorrow, I guess. But I just wanted to quickly highlight a letter written by 30 altruistic millionaires who knew such a thing actually existed, saying that them and their class should be taxed because the cost of recovery is too high. To go back to that smoke and mirrors budget, where's Rishi Sunak going to pull that rabbit out of the hat? What are your thoughts on that? The wealth tax.
Well, to put the economy right, you'd be talking billions of pounds, not millions of pounds. So it wouldn't be millionaires, it would be billionaires who would need to do that. I don't think there are enough around who would like to see, and their tax advisors and their investment advisors and their asset minds and all the rest of it, all that conglomerate of stuff that hangs around billionaires, who's going to say, all right, just give your money away, you might as well. Because my question would be, if I had billions, all right, I don't mind giving it away, but I want to know where it's going to be spent. I just don't want to be chucked into public services or chucked into the National Health Service or thrown at charities. I want to know specifically where my money is going to be spent. Now, I don't think many people can answer those kind of questions. I'm sure there are altruistic billionaires. There are altruistic millionaires as well. But the one does not necessarily mean you're going to get results out of whatever they want to give away. It just simply won't happen.
Well, thank you, Mr. Wilson. Now for an update on the COVID-19 pandemic, Adeswa Mora is here with us. Good morning, Adeswa.
Good morning, Tundu. Good morning, Dr. Abachi.
Good morning.
Well, morning. Top of this, 3 of the top 5 countries reporting the most COVID-19 deaths at the moment. Russia, Ukraine, and Romania are in Eastern Europe. But we're also seeing a surge in cases coming from that part of the world. Over the weekend, they surpassed 20 million infections so far for Eastern Europe. Globally, the picture, according to the Johns Hopkins University, says or shows that over 243 million people have now been infected with the coronavirus, and the virus has also killed over 4.9 million people. Currently, according to the data, over 6.8 billion doses of vaccines have now been administered. China, in its recent data released in the last 24 hours, is claiming to have fully vaccinated 75.6% of its population. Here in Nigeria, in the past 24 hours, the country's Center for Disease Control has reported 165 confirmed cases and 26 COVID-related deaths in its latest data release. The new cases are reported from 9 states as well as the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja. But the report shows that a number of backlog of cases are coming in from Lagos and Abuja. It shows that 23 out of the 26 deaths reported in the last 24 hours are actually a backlog from the 18th, the 19th, the 21st, and 23rd of October, coming in from Lagos State, which is the epicenter of the pandemic in Nigeria. Staying with the COVID update in Nigeria, inbound travelers may be in for tougher times at the Lagos airport. Should the hiccups with payment platforms remain unchanged? I know this is something Tundu has spoken about in the past on the show. The Lagos state government is saying that it's carrying out forensic audit of COVID test payment for inbound travelers after reports emerged last week that officials are now asking passengers to pay into private accounts. The government says preliminary reports shows nothing amiss. However, an official has been suspended pending investigation, and that the government will henceforth discontinue the stopgap measure to help ameliorate the passengers' experience. So we keep an eye to see what exactly is going on with payment for the PCRO in-country tests for inbound travelers into Nigeria, especially with Lagos Airport. Vaccination also continues in Nigeria. Officially, over 5.5 million eligible people have now been targeted in the inoculation, have actually been inoculated with one dose. Let me say that again. Over 5.5 million people targeted in Nigeria's inoculation drive against COVID-19 have received one dose, while some 2.8 million others, or 2.6% of the targeted population, have now been fully vaccinated in Nigeria. And away from Nigeria, South Africa is trying to end vaccine inequality by replicating its own Africa can no longer wait, and that's the message from the scientists in the country. They have been assembling and calibrating the equipment needed to reverse engineer the Moderna mRNA vaccine. And in a rare move, the WHO has backed the move. Some experts say reverse engineering, that is recreating vaccines from fragments of publicly available information, as one of the few remaining ways to actually redress the power imbalances of the pandemic. And finally this morning, Dr. Sumaya Swaminathan, a chief scientist for the World Health Organization, has cautioned countries relying solely on just COVID-19 vaccines to return to some semblance of normal. She says there's a strong scientific argument to be made for continued enforcement of other measures, such as good respiratory and hand hygiene, as well as proper ventilation. Dr. Swaminathan also called for expanded vaccine equity and sharing of tools in poorer countries to prevent the spread of coronavirus that causes COVID-19 and its continued mutation. At the moment, you recall that we're seeing even a sub-variant or a sub-lineage of the highly transmissible Delta variant in some parts of the world. She says vaccines are very effective against preventing severe diseases, but they are not 100% effective against infection. Basically, she says vaccines are good, but they are not the silver bullet, guys.
Right, that's really important to stress. You can see what's happening in the UK and their over-reliance on vaccines, and their numbers are rising accordingly. I think it was a huge mistake for the British government this summer to tell the public that it's really entirely up to your, what do they call it? Is it good British common sense or whatever that nonsense was? Whether you want to wear a mask or not on public transport, we can see what a disaster that it is. The whole idea is not about preventing deaths, although obviously that's extremely useful. It's about just keeping the numbers down, especially for the overstretched NHS. And yes, Adeswa, I'm actually sorry that you remember I was completely appalled over the payment to the Lagos airport. I actually had like a panic about it because it was such a disaster waiting to happen. But the only silver lining here is that we've been assured, haven't we, that the final reports of the forensic audit will be made public. And I appreciate that transparency.
Okay, I think the big point beyond Dr. Swaminathan saying that vaccination is not a silver bullet. It's just reminding us at one level that, look, you may be vaccinated. It's just to prevent severe hospitalization or maybe, the rate of death. But at the same time, you can be reinfected and, the community will also be affected, particularly as there are new variants. Although one Russian scientist has said that, look, these viruses have what you call an evolutionary limit. But even with that, vaccination will be useful, even if it is not the only thing. Dr. Swaminathan made the same point that has been made repeatedly by the WHO, which is that, look, global equity is important. Out of all the vaccines that are out there that have been produced, many of the developed countries have done 75% full vaccination of their populations. And at the same time, they are asking for booster vaccines. Only this morning in the UK, the NHS boss was saying that, look, people should take the booster jabs so that there will be no threat of the imposition of a plan B by December or later this year, and all of that. Whereas, only less than 1% of vaccines have been made available to the rest of the world. And in most parts of Africa, most of the countries have not done even up to 5% vaccination. Most of them are at the range of 2.6% vaccination. So she's calling strongly for solidarity. She's calling strongly for vaccine equity. But would that happen? Because the wealthy countries have not been keeping their promises. Even the COVAX alliance that is supposed to supply about 1 billion doses to developing, to low income and middle income countries by the end of this year, they've not been able to supply anything close to that. And the rich countries entering into bilateral agreements have not really been forthcoming, which is why it is important that the production hub, the vaccine production hub, the reverse engineering process that you talked about, that is now being reported with regard to the Moderna vaccine in South Africa is useful. But the challenge that receives is one of intellectual property. We're told that intellectual property details have not been worked out. But one of the pillars of the strategy that was announced about 3 weeks ago by the WHO is that, look, big pharma, pharmaceutical companies, should provide opportunities in terms of transfer of technology, transfer of knowledge, the development of production centers across the world. But I think that, look, beyond what is being done in Cape Town, the Cape Town hub that it is called, other African countries should be more forward-looking to make sure that they are not dependent strictly on the goodwill of the wealthy countries that doesn't seem to be coming at the same rate at which they promise. After all, Egypt and Algeria and Morocco, they're entering into partnerships, particularly with Sinopharm, to produce their own vaccines. I hope that Nigeria will also begin to look in that direction and do more rather than relying on the generosity of wealthy countries in a world that is unequal and in which promises are not always followed. Well, thank you very much, Adesua.